Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into the story of Henry Ford's innovation.
Right. Not just the usual story, but really digging into how he built that company and, well, kind of changed the world.
Exactly. And we've looked at a lot of material, kind of boiled it down into 7 key stages of his journey.
Think of it like a shortcut, yeah. A way to quickly grasp Ford's big ideas, the twists, the turns, and what we can still learn from it all.
So if you're listening and want to get the real story, fast and deep, this is for you. We're peeling back the layers.
Might find some surprises in there, too.
Okay, let's do it.
So let's start right at the beginning. Before Ford Motor Company, just Henry Ford, the guy tinkering away.
Right, the tinkerer. So even before the famous company, he was already deep into experimenting, wasn't he?
Oh, absolutely. And not just thinking. He was actively trying to figure out what should power these new machines.
Steam, electricity.
Yeah, he looked into those, steam, electricity. But he kind of methodically tested them out for, lighter vehicles.
And landed on gasoline.
Landed on gasoline, yeah. Seemed like the best bet for power and range back then.
And this wasn't just theory, right? He was building things.
Definitely building things in the workshop. That 1896 quadricycle, that's a perfect example. Build, test, tweak, build again. Iteration, basically.
Learning by doing. Getting grease under his fingernails.
Totally. And we have to remember, it wasn't smooth sailing. Those first couple of companies,
The Detroit Automobile Company.
that one and the Henry Ford Company, both fizzled out. Failed.
But that wasn't the end of the story, obviously.
No way. See, for him, those weren't just failures. They were like crash courses.
Yeah.
He learned so much about the nuts and bolts of making things, about pricing.
About whether people were even ready to buy these things.
Exactly. Market readiness. Big lesson. He got that practical engineering knowledge, not just book smarts, but a real feel for the machines.
How they worked, how they could be built better, maybe cheaper.
Cheaper, simpler, all those early engine problems. They definitely informed his later successes.
And the business side, too, I imagine. It's not just the invention.
Oh, for sure. He got a tough education in things like finding reliable parts, managing costs, and just convincing people that this horseless carriage thing was actually useful.
Hard sell back then, probably.
You bet. But, even those failed ventures weren't a total loss. He built connections, met investors, future partners, people who'd eventually back him when things clicked.
So, thinking about innovators today, what's the lesson from that early phase?
Well, don't be afraid to experiment.
Right.
And failure, it's just data. It's learning.
Okay. And the idea alone isn't enough.
No, you need to figure out how to actually make it, and if anyone will buy it. The business model matters just as much.
Plus sheer persistence. He just kept going.
Resilience, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely vital. You get knocked down, you got to get back up. Which brings us to 1903. Ford Motor Company is born.
Okay, so now it's official. A real company.
New investors, Ford's in charge. And the next few years, say up to about 1908, that's all about building the foundation.
Before the Model T, right? There were other cars.
Oh, yeah. Model A, Model C, I think they went up to Model S. A whole series.
What was the focus then? Just building any car?
Not quite. Even then, you see this clear vision emerging. He wanted a car that was affordable, reliable for like the average person.
Not just a toy for the rich.
Exactly. Democratizing it. And you see that in how they develop the cars. Not just one model launched perfectly.
They put out several.
8 different models in just a few years, each one probably learning from the last. Little improvements, tweaks, a constant cycle.
Makes sense. And to build all those, they needed parts, right?
Crucial point.
Yeah.
Often overlooked. They had to build a solid network of suppliers. Getting reliable components consistently was a huge challenge and a key innovation in itself.
So, summing up those early Ford Motor Company years, what did they actually achieve?
Well, first, they proved the company could work. It was a viable business, making cars, selling them.
And learning from those sales, presumably.
Definitely. Every model was like a market test. What do people like? What will they pay? What breaks? Getting that real-world feedback.
And getting better at actually making the cars, too.
For sure. They were honing their manufacturing skills. Not the assembly line yet, but figuring out how to produce in larger numbers, setting the stage.
So if you're starting a business today, what's the takeaway from that period?
Define your value proposition. Be crystal clear about it. Ford's focus on affordability. That really hit home with the big market.
Stick to that core idea.
Yeah. And don't be scared to launch early. Get something out there, learn from how people use it, and iterate, improve.
Good advice. And the supply chain thing.
Critical. Build that reliable network from day one. You need good parts consistently if you want to scale up. Can't build on shaky foundations.
Makes total sense. Which leads us, I guess, to the big one.
The Icon, October 1908. The Model T arrives.
The car for the great multitude, as he said. This really was the game changer, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's amazing how many innovations were packed into that one design.
Like the engine.
Yeah, the engine and transmission. Enclosed design protected the moving parts, made it way more durable. And that removable cylinder head, genius. Made maintenance so much easier.
Before that, engine repair must have been a nightmare.
Pretty much. And the controls. That planetary transmission.
Sounds complex.
Actually, the opposite. It was simpler, lighter, tougher, cheaper to make, and crucially, way easier for people to learn to drive than the other systems around. Less intimidating.
But the real magic was the price, right? Affordability.
That was the killer app, really.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just built cheap. It was designed for efficient manufacturing. Every part was thought about in terms of how easy it would be to make.
Smart. And the impact.
Transformative. Suddenly, owning a car wasn't some distant dream for most people. It became possible. Millions of Americans got mobile, changed everything, how they lived, where they worked.
And it made Ford? Well, Ford.
Cemented them. Dominant player for decades. Ford became the name for affordable cars. Household name.
And it forced other changes too, didn't it? Like roads.
Huge ripple effects. Suddenly, everyone needed better roads, paved roads, and gas stations, repair shops. The whole support system sprang up because the cars were actually out there being used.
Okay, so for today's world, what principles from the Model T still hold true?
While focusing on a big, widespread need. Personal mobility for everyone that was huge. Find that need and solve it practically, affordably.
Keep it simple.
Simplicity was key. Easy to use, easy to understand. That drives adoption.
And keep improving, keep cutting costs.
Never stop. That continuous drive to make it better and cheaper that makes it accessible to more and more people.
Which logically flows into how they made it cheaper.
Exactly. The next massive leap, the moving assembly line.
Right. Highland Park plant, December 1913. This is where manufacturing basically gets reinvented.
Totally rewritten. And the weird thing is, the idea didn't even come from the car world.
Where did it come from?
Meat packing plants, believe it or not. Ford saw how they used disassembly lines, carcasses moving, workers doing one specific cut. He thought, why not flip that for assembly?
Bring the work to the worker instead of the worker moving around.
Precisely. The car chassis moved, the workers stayed put, each doing one small, specific task over and over. It cut out so much wasted movement, so much time.
Division of labor taken to the extreme.
To an unprecedented level. Break the job down into tiny, repeatable steps. Each worker got incredibly fast at their one thing.
And you needed standardized parts for that to work, right?
Absolutely crucial. Interchangeable parts. Everything had to fit perfectly every time. Streamlined assembly and made repairs easier down the line, too.
The results were pretty staggering.
Mind-blowing. Production speed just exploded.
Yeah.
Assembling a chassis went from, what, over 12 hours?
Yeah, something like that.
Down to about an hour and a half?
90 minutes.
Wow. And that efficiency gain?
Directly led to lower costs, which meant Ford could drop the price of the Model T even further. More affordable, wider market.
And it changed who could work there, too. Yeah. Because the tasks were so simplified, you didn't need years of craft skills for every job on the line. Opened up factory work to a much broader range of people. Less skilled labor, essentially.
So looking at operations today, the assembly line lesson.
Optimize your process. Relentlessly hunt down waste, streamline every step. That's the core idea.
Break down complexity.
Into manageable bits, yeah. Makes things faster, easier to train people to.
And look outside your own industry for ideas.
Definitely. That meatpacking inspiration. Genius. Sometimes the solution is hiding in plain sight, just somewhere unexpected.
But that assembly line, it was tough work, right? Repetitive, grinding.
Incredibly tough, intense pace, monotonous tasks, and yeah, that created a big problem.
Right.
People quitting.
Yeah.
High turnover.
Became a headache. So Ford's response.
Another shocker. January 1914, he announces the $5 a day wage.
$5 a day. That was huge back then.
More than double the going rate. Plus, he cut the workday down to 8 hours. The whole industry was stunned.
Why did he do it? Just being generous.
Well, maybe partly. But it was also incredibly shrewd business. He figured higher wages would attract better workers and, crucially, keep them there. Reduce that costly turnover.
Lower hiring and training costs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the shorter workday wasn't just nice. It allowed them to run 3 shifts around the clock. More production.
Ah, okay. And there was another angle too, right? Something about customers.
The masterstroke. He realized that if he paid his workers enough, they could afford to buy the cars they were building.
creating his own customer.
A virtuous cycle. Yeah. Brilliant, really.
Did it work?
Like a charm. Turnover plummeted. People were lining up to work at Ford. He got a stable, more motivated workforce.
And productivity probably went up.
Big time. People worked harder when they felt valued, fairly paid. Morale improved.
And the wider impact, beyond Ford.
Massive. That $5 day is often credited with helping build the American middle class. It boosted wages elsewhere eventually and created this mass consumer market.
Wow. So the lesson there for businesses today.
Invest in your people. Fair wages, good conditions.
Yeah.
It's not just the right thing to do, it pays off. Better retention, higher productivity.
And think bigger picture about the whole system.
Yeah, see the connections.
Yeah.
Your employees are part of the economy, potential customers. It's all linked.
And sometimes you need to make bold, unconventional moves.
Definitely. Challenge the status quo. Sometimes the radical decision is the smartest one.
So Ford's expanding like crazy. What came next? This idea of self-sufficiency.
Vertical integration, yeah. As the company got huge, Ford developed this ambition to control, well, everything. The entire process.
From raw materials onward.
From the iron ore in the ground, the trees in the forest, the coal.
Yeah.
All the way to the finished car rolling off the line.
Yeah.
He wanted ownership of it all.
So he bought mines.
Forests? Mines, forests, coal fields, limestone quarries, even his own railroad, and a fleet of ships on the Great Lakes.
Wow. Total control.
That was the dream. He even tried to set up rubber plantations down in Brazil, Fordlandia.
How did that go?
Not so well, actually. Ambitious idea, but it ultimately failed. Logistical nightmare, cultural clashes.
Shows the limits, maybe. But the core idea was this massive integration.
Yeah, facilities like the River Rouge plant were the ultimate expression of it. Designed to take in raw materials at one end, iron ore, coal, sand, and have finished cars driving out the other. Processing, manufacturing, assembly, all in one giant complex.
The logic being more control over quality and cost.
That was the idea. Manage the whole supply chain directly, avoid relying on outside suppliers, keep costs down, ensure quality.
Fewer disruptions.
Less dependence on others, yeah. Mitigate those risks.
And then maybe more efficiency through coordinating everything.
Potentially, yes. Tighter integration could, in theory, streamline the whole operation.
So for businesses thinking about their supply chains, what's the insight here?
Well, you have to weigh the benefits of control against the complexity, right? Owning key parts of your value chain can be powerful.
But it's a lot to manage.
A lot. Especially on a global scale like Fordlandia attempted. You need to really think about all the resources, all the processes, and be realistic about the challenges.
Okay, so that brings us towards the later part of his career. Did the innovation stop?
Not entirely. Even later on, despite, some controversies surrounding him personally, that innovative spark was still there.
In what ways?
Well, he got really interested in material science. Soybeans, actually.
Soybeans. For cars.
Yeah. Soybean-based plastics. He saw potential there. Use them for some smaller parts. Even built a prototype car with a plastic body. Kind of ahead of its time.
Interesting. What else?
Engine tech. Big one was the flathead V8 engine in 1932.
The V8. That was Ford.
Yep. Made V8 power relatively affordable for the mass market. Big deal at the time. Helped keep Ford competitive as tastes changed. People wanted more power.
And outside of cars, you mentioned something else.
Greenfield Village. His historical preservation project, you could argue that's an innovation in itself, a new way of preserving and presenting history, especially industrial history.
So these later efforts, what was their lasting benefit?
The plastic stuff hinted at future possibilities, even if it wasn't practical then. The V8 was crucial for market share, kept them relevant. And Greenfield Village, huge cultural and educational legacy, still there today.
And the lessons from this later period.
Keep exploring. New tech, new materials. Don't get complacent. Continuous innovation is key for the long haul.
Adapt to the market.
Absolutely. The V8 shows that. You have to respond to changing demands in technology.
And think beyond just the product.
Consider the wider impact. Yeah, like the philanthropy, the preservation work.
Yeah.
There's potential for contributions beyond just the bottom line, though Ford's legacy there is complex too.
Okay. So wrapping this all up, Henry Ford, it's quite a story.
It really is. Complicated legacy, no doubt. Brilliant innovator, huge impact. But also, significant flaws and controversies.
Can't separate those. But that relentless drive for efficiency, for affordability, for mass production.
It fundamentally changed everything. Not just cars, but modern life. Manufacturing, consumer culture, the middle class. His fingerprints are everywhere.
And even with all the debates about him as a person, the core ideas, the entrepreneurial lessons from his journey,
Invaluable. Still relevant. That spirit of tackling big problems, optimizing, scaling.
which kind of leads to a final thought, maybe for our listeners.
Yeah.
Thinking about today, with technology changing so incredibly fast, which of those core Ford principles, efficiency, simplicity, affordability, scale, which ones feel most important right now?
Good question.
And maybe, how do we balance that drive for efficiency, which Ford championed, with other things that matter today? Sustainability, worker well-being, ethics?
That's the big challenge, isn't it? Finding that balance. Lots to think about there.
Definitely. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the innovation of Henry Ford. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into the story of Henry Ford's innovation.
Right. Not just the usual story, but really digging into how he built that company and, well, kind of changed the world.
Exactly. And we've looked at a lot of material, kind of boiled it down into 7 key stages of his journey.
Think of it like a shortcut, yeah. A way to quickly grasp Ford's big ideas, the twists, the turns, and what we can still learn from it all.
So if you're listening and want to get the real story, fast and deep, this is for you. We're peeling back the layers.
Might find some surprises in there, too.
Okay, let's do it.
So let's start right at the beginning. Before Ford Motor Company, just Henry Ford, the guy tinkering away.
Right, the tinkerer. So even before the famous company, he was already deep into experimenting, wasn't he?
Oh, absolutely. And not just thinking. He was actively trying to figure out what should power these new machines.
Steam, electricity.
Yeah, he looked into those. Steam, electricity. But he kind of methodically tested them out for, lighter vehicles.
And landed on gasoline.
Landed on gasoline, yeah. Seemed like the best bet for power and range back then.
And this wasn't just theory, right? He was building things.
Definitely building things in the workshop. That 1896 quadricycle, that's a perfect example. Build, test, tweak, build again. Iteration, basically.
Learning by doing, getting grease under his fingernails.
Totally. And we have to remember, it wasn't smooth sailing. Those first couple of companies,
The Detroit Automobile Company.
that one and the Henry Ford Company, both fizzled out, failed.
But that wasn't the end of the story, obviously.
No way. See, for him, those weren't just failures. They were like crash courses.
Yeah.
He learned so much about the nuts and bolts of making things, about pricing.
About whether people were even ready to buy these things.
Exactly. Market readiness. Big lesson. He got that practical engineering knowledge, not just book smarts, but a real feel for the machines.
How they worked, how they could be built better, maybe cheaper.
Cheaper, simpler, all those early engine problems. They definitely informed his later successes.
And the business side, too, I imagine. It's not just the invention.
Oh, for sure. He got a tough education in things like finding reliable parts, managing costs, and just convincing people that this horseless carriage thing was actually useful.
Hard sell back then, probably.
You bet. But, even those failed ventures weren't a total loss. He built connections, met